Hey guys, Calvin here from Move. Today I'm going to be showing you how to set up and light this 3D scene. Now I'm going to be using the 3D software Blender, however this can be done in any 3D application, so don't worry if you're not using Blender specifically, as the workflows and techniques that I'm going to be showing you can be applied in pretty much any 3D application. Now I have already recorded a 30-minute version of this video, but I did want to make a shorter speedrun-ish version for those that don't want to sit through me rambling on about individual shortcuts and whatnot. So if you're completely new to Blender, I do recommend watching the long version. Otherwise, thanks for joining me and let's dive in. First of all, we're going to start off with a plane and extrude one side up. This is going to act as our floor and back wall. Next, we're going to add a plateau by creating a cube and scaling it to our needs. I like to keep an eye on the scaling when doing this to make sure my final scene isn't hundreds of meters in size. Next, we'll create a second plateau for our object of interest to sit on top of. I'm using a cylinder for this, which I scale down on the z-axis and make some bevels to make the corners look less harsh. In my reference scene, I had a bunch of cylinders at the front of the main plateau to add some visual detail. To create that, simply create a slim cylinder and add an array modifier to copy it along the front of the plateau. Now, if you're using a separate, different software other than Blender, you can either copy the cylinder multiple times or instance the object. And instancing is my preferred route because if you then change one cylinder, then all of them will change, and that will help you make adjustments quickly. With the main scene almost finished, let's add our temporary object of interest. In this case, we're just going to be using good old Suzanne, and let's start with the lighting. The main light source in our scene is going to be a skylight. This looks really good in Blender, and most 3D applications have a similar version to this, so even if you're not using Blender, you should be able to follow along. Worst case, you can try to find a good looking HDRI online and use that as an alternative, but I do recommend using a skylight. Before playing around with the sun position, I am creating a camera so that we can see what we're actually working with. Then we're going to move the sun to where our model is lit nicely from one side, and we have a shadow going, just halfway across the model. Now let's add our shadows. For this, we will be using a bunch of planes that will act as a roof with slits. Now it's down to you to position these planes to your liking. As you might have noticed, our scene is still incredibly bright. This is due to the fact that our room doesn't actually have any walls at the moment. Therefore, we don't have any ambient shadows from the different walls. Let's go back to our main floor and extrude the back and side walls up to the point where we are happy with the amount of shadows and light in our scene. Before we move on to the final stage, which is shading, it's important to note that inside of Blender, we need to apply the transforms of our objects every now and then, as it can otherwise cause issues with the modifiers and shaders. So let's go ahead and do that. And with that done, let's start shading. Depending on your software package, these next steps might be slightly different. In Blender, I'm going to start off with a texture coordinate node, and we're going to plug the object output into a mapping node that will be driving a Musgrave texture. We will be using the Musgrave texture as our driver for the bump and roughness. I'll reduce the bump intensity to 0.1 and plug it into the normal input of our shader, and we're then going to tweak the roughness by adding a ramp node. And there you have it. If you want to get really fancy, you can replace the object of interest with something else and even animate the different objects, such as the skylight, to get fancy shots like this one. If you are interested to find out how I made this final shot, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, as I will be making a video on these awesome fog lights soon. So if you made it until this point in the video, thank you so much for sticking around. You're awesome, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Cheers.